Welcome to the Pipeline and People podcast powered by Versorix, the show where boutique firm leaders trade less admin for more advisory. Each week, we share actionable tactics to keep the pipeline full and your team performing at its best. I'm your host, Jaden Parisi. Let's dive in. Today's guest is Dr. Gary Ansel, co-founder of Healthcare Inroads, a consulting firm that helps MedTech companies, healthcare systems, and investors move from concept to commercialization faster and with fewer missteps. Gary, thanks for joining. Could you give us a little bit of information on your background and how you got started with Inroads?
Sure, my pleasure. So I'm an interventional cardiologist. I've kind of done a bunch of different things, but the last 8 years of my career, I was the system chief. So I helped manage the whole healthcare system for Ohio Health for all vascular care, which included managing vascular surgery, interventional radiology, and interventional cardiology with vascular, as well as vascular medicine. And then about 4 years ago, I left clinical practice to help get a device that I had created back into the hospitals, and then to create, at that time it was called Healthcare Insights with Dr. Michael Jaff and Steve Cagnetta. And then we merged with Inroad Medical a year ago, January. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of learning. And it's amazing to see how much need there really was out in the industry.
Yeah, awesome. So you mentioned, you had like a device, a product maybe, but that's not what Inroad does, right? What does
No,
Inroads
it's
do?
not. That's totally
Yeah.
separate. Inroad
Okay.
really looks at helping, just like you said, MedTech development, even the strategics, healthcare institutions and venture capital groups to look at different medical devices and to see if they should be on the shelf or not. And what's really hit a nerve probably in the last 3 years is this value analysis. As you know, value analysis committees are kind of like industry-wide now. And they have a lot of different faces, but they are obstructionary to uptake of medical devices. And that's because most people aren't prepared for them. So we decided to create a formal process and try to actually do that early on in the med tech development so that people could really figure out whether they should actually even go to market with this.
Mhm. Okay, interesting. You've worn a lot of hats: clinician, operator, advisor. What perspective do you find yourself kind of drawing on the most in this work?
Oh, that's really good. When I was the system chief, one of the things we had to do was get the specialties that did similar procedures on the same page, and to get over 45 docs on the same page as far as devices to use, and to try to create more uniform care. Because when you can do that, not only can you measure your outcomes, the institution, the hospital, or the healthcare system can predict their costs, can predict their outcomes, can predict their complications. And those are really important this day and age, because if you have a whole bunch of people doing a whole bunch of different things, nobody knows what the outcomes are. And it's not a good place for a healthcare institution to be.
Yeah, for sure. So then when a client comes to you and says, "Look, we need help," what does Healthcare Inroads do? What can you do for me? What do you say to them?
So what we do is we look at the whole process. We've got senior advisors that have regulatory experience. We have big data experience. We have people that have been hospital presidents, like myself, system chiefs. We have lawyers that have helped with M&A, or what I should say is uptake, pricing, things like that. And we actually have another lawyer who actually ran one of the bigger journals called Endovascular Today for, over 20 years. And when we look at all those different experiences, we can look and kind of summarize, okay, where's this product or drug or approach really going to fit in? And what does that really need to look like? And so we really do try to look at the kind of like a holistic look. We're not there to just tell them they have a great device. That is not what we're at. We are there to say, is the idea good? Are the numbers good? What's the challenges that are going to be there to have uptake in a healthcare system? Because if you don't look at that, if you're the venture group, yeah, it looks like a great idea, but if you don't know the problems, or I call it the bumps in the road that they're going to have to go through to try to get on shelf, you could waste a lot of money early on. And I'd rather not have money wasted on devices that aren't going to get there. And for the physician, or, I really think physicians should be more entrepreneurial. They're the ones that use these devices.
Mhm.
But it's amazing how many of them spend a lot of their own money going down the road on patents and things like that before they really do a good business plan on their idea. And then they oftentimes have wasted their money and they're like, they're distraught over that, but they learn from it. And so we try to help avoid those pitfalls so that they can get a good idea about whether that idea is going to have good uptake, things like that.
For sure. Have you ever kind of someone's come to you with a product or a device and you're like, this isn't going to work? Or
Oh,
no.
yeah, very common. And the reason being because as physicians, we oftentimes look for things that just make our lives more livable. And in the, 20 years ago, that was actually a pretty good idea. Nowadays, hospitals aren't going to pay for that unless there's a reimbursement that increases for that. There's so many things that are associated with a new product, education, turnover, unforeseen complications. That's going to have a hard time. And so there are many ideas we've looked at and said, you know what, the numbers aren't there. I mean, it's a small number. Industry's not going to invest in this without having to cannibalize their own product line unless there's a reason from a reimbursement standpoint to do that. And so we look at it from several aspects, but we make sure one, it has a clinical need, and two, do the numbers make sense? And when you go to them and you say, well, the numbers don't make sense. And then the third thing is this: how much of that product do you think you're going to own at the end of this process?
Mm.
And they tell me over 10%, we try to do the hard awakening because there's so many aspects of it, as you know. There's regulatory, there's the CEO, there's the marketing, there's all the prototyping, there's all those different things that are going to cost money. And either you're going to spend out of your pocket and maintain ownership, which most people can't afford, or you're going to give up part of that ownership. And so most people at the end of the day are way below 10%. And if they can't handle that, they just walk away, which is fine.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So what are some of the kind of the most common challenges that teams, consistently find or underestimate when planning for commercialization? Is it that I'm only going to own less than 10%, there's not going to be adoption, or is it something else?
It's not considering the number of companies that might buy your idea. One, people think companies buy patents. They rarely do that. If they do, it's pennies on the dollar. The next is, commercialization. Well, I just got to show them some of my friends really like this. That's not going to get you on the, really on the
Yeah.
card these days. If everybody's nice to you, I mean, they try to say, yeah, it's a great idea. We'll look at it when it's farther down the road. But nowadays, everybody's risk adverse, as you should be in this economy, and they want to see sales. And are you going to spend the money for a sales force? I mean, those are all big ticket items that people oftentimes really don't consider. The other thing is that so there's only so many strategics out there, and if there's already let's just say make up a number 8, and if there's already 4 similar products out there, you only have 4 that you could potentially sell to. And how many other ideas are working down the road just like yours? And so you really have to look at that. And I'll give you an example: the thrombectomy, the clot removal industry. There's 35 devices that have venture funded movement in that field. There's not 35 companies. There's not going to be 35 sales forces. It's just not going to happen. So many of these companies are going to really end up in the dust because they aren't hitting a particular need. And when we talk to them about the value analysis or the value evaluation, they oftentimes will say, we'll get to that down the road. No, it's the first thing you have to look at, because if you can't demonstrate your true value, whether it be clinical or financial or better, both, you're going to have a hard time down the road. Plus, you're spending other people's money or your own, but it's usually
Yeah.
you're spending other people's money. And I remember one physician venture guy. I said, "Would you do it again?" He goes, "I don't know." I go, "Why? You made a ton of money." He goes, "I've lost a lot of friends and family on the way." He goes, "Because you don't have a hit all the time, and people really hate when you lose their money." And so we try to bring that to the physician entrepreneur so they can internalize that, or the startup company.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have like a kind of recent example of a client engagement, start to finish, you could walk us through? I know it's probably like you have to privatize things, but
Yeah, I could do that pretty easily though, just to give you an example of a success story. So there was a commodity item, I'll just term it central line, which
Mhm.
are, commodities at hospitals, but they are also highly complicated. Lots of patients get them, they have infection risks, they have thrombosis, they have lots of things that can occur. And the field is owned by really two or three strategics. And, it's really hard to supplant somebody like that. Well, this company had a great idea. They had a great technology. The cost of goods was the same or less than the polyethylene out there. And, it didn't allow for clot to form inside of it. It could back up into it, but it didn't propagate clot. They won't tell you, but bacteria don't seem to be able to hold on to it. It's non-inflammatory. And so the patient doesn't get an irritated tract. Lots of good things about it. And the other thing that they didn't really recognize is on their instructions for use, where most of the other devices, if you have an infection, you have to have your blood cleared before you can put the lines in because they can get infected. This one didn't have that in their instructions. That's a 3 to 5 day shorter length of stay for patients. Well, they were out there trying to sell this, and for the first 6 months, they really didn't have any hospital or healthcare system to talk to them. Zero is a big number. So they got to know a couple of my partners. And so they said, well, can you help us with this? And we said, well, let's go through the process. This was going to be one of the early companies. So we said, we'll kind of do it to learn on this as well. But, this is our approach. So we took them through the whole process. We looked at their data. We looked at all the financial aspects. We looked at the clinical aspects, and we helped them with their quote unquote pitch. Because like I said, we have CFOs, hospital presidents, system chiefs. So we can put the sales pitch or the positioning of that product into language that the C-suite understands. And oftentimes it's not that my product is cheaper or I save money, it's revenue generation. And so when we got a hold of all this and actually got into the scientific literature too, we could show them that their revenue generation for these patients was going to be tremendous. 6 months later, they were in 17 healthcare systems, including Stanford and the VA. I mean, that's a big success story. And the other aspect of that was, when you go to get a new type of product on the shelf, or to get approval, we do what's called mock panel analysis or mock panel, because you have to go through the FDA panel. So we do the same thing for value analysis. We get a committee of different individuals, and the company has to show us their pitch. And we'd say, you got to do it in 15 minutes because that's what these value analysis committees are, with questions. And we are non-threatening, but we're going to be, where the rubber hits the road, because we've done this so often. We know where they fall down. And then we do this 3 or 4 times, and all of a sudden, just like on those mock FDA panels, the positioning, the be able to deliver the message becomes very efficient and very well done. And that's what makes a big difference. And so we've had several, big success stories for this, because it's what's the secret sauce. It's you have to be able to talk the language of the C-suite, or you're not going to be there.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I feel like a lot of these people get so caught up in all the technical details, what this thing can do, but that's not who you're appealing to. You have to appeal to your audience, right?
Exactly right.
Cool. So, where does like misalignment between regulatory reimbursement and, market strategy play into that situation specifically?
Tell me what you mean by that.
Like, I from what you've told me, you had this great product and you kind of coached them a little bit and you did their you taught them how to present it to C-suite, but where does all the kind of back end stuff, helping them with their strategy and the regulatory nuances and, other misalignment things? Like, I'm just trying to get a sense of your process kind of start to finish here.
Okay, great idea. So let's just say it's a startup, because this can happen with strategics too, because they're risk averse. So they really, if they're going to buy a product or buy a company, they want to go down this process as well, because they want to know, what are going to be the pushbacks from the healthcare system, so that when we get to that point, we have a smoother transition. So we look at everything. We look at what was their benchtop testing. We look at, I mean, all those different things. I remember one company goes, well, you're a bunch of doctors and engineers. But I go, listen, we've done this so often. We can oftentimes find problems in your, in your process. So we try to find that. We try to figure out what clinically, first, always has to be a clinical. What's the clinical benefit? What's the real benefit of this device that's going to be used in patients? Once we can clearly identify that, then we start looking at cost of goods, what's your competition? We really do a business plan. And it's amazing to me how many startup companies, they do the positive part of a business plan, but they don't do the challenges part of the business plan. And that's the most important part. And so we make them do that. You have to go through that. And so we want to know where's your competition? Where's the pushback going to be? And then we help them with, okay, is it user friendly? What are going to be the education needs for the staff? Because in operating rooms and angio suites and things like that, the environment's changed since COVID. You've got at least 25% of your employees are contract employees, not as well trained in helping with devices and operations and things like that. So we look at that. How simple is this? What's the ongoing education process? What's the risk of taking that new device in there? Because that's one of the things the CFOs really want to know, or COOs as well. What's that risk that I'm not seeing because the company doesn't tell me about that? So we try to address all those different things. What's the shelf space? Do they have to keep it in a refrigerator? Where would that be? What's the shelf life of that? What's going to potentially, of the competition, what's going to potentially come off the shelf so that you can verbalize that to these value analysis committees? And then once you can do all that and you can present that both in an elevator pitch and in a 15-minute presentation, now you're starting to really look at things. What's your reimbursement code? Because those are all the kind of key things that a healthcare institution should be looking at. But it's amazing how many times, because nobody has the secret sauce yet, because the value analysis committees have, probably 10 or 12 different faces. And, and I get it. I remember I talked to a hospital president one time. I go, value analysis committees, I just see them as like a construction sign that says, do not come down this road. He goes, well, we're losing money, but I know how much we're losing. I don't want any more variables. Not a great business plan, right? I mean, if it's like a restaurant that says, I'm just going to cut part of my menu off so I'm not spending as much. Okay, short term, that might work. Long term, probably not. I want to know how I make money. And so we go through all that. And so from start to finish, and it's really a lot of soul searching because many, especially startup companies, part of it, you drink your own Kool-Aid. You want to be positive. Well, you really need to have somebody who's not at risk, in looking at your product and going, well, here's the good side. Here's the not so good side. So let's see if we can improve the not so good side, or should you not be there in the first place, so that they can really anticipate the hurdles they're going to have to jump through. And then we help them really with that presentation for the value analysis committee, so that the person who's going to be the administrator and needs to answer to the C-suite, who's going, I'm losing money, I can't lose anymore, goes, well, this is the revenue generation. This is why we should be doing this. That's what we did for that one example company. And that's what got them all the excitement and started to get uptake around the nation.
Okay, that's a great story. Sounds like a good process. Very interesting, and I want to turn the lens inward now a little bit to Inroads. What's next for you guys? Any new offerings, partnerships on the horizon? Where do you want to be in 12 months?
Yeah, I think one is growth. And we've started to become international. We have docs from Europe. We now have a doc from New Zealand who did more first in man than anybody, so that we can expand our offerings. We also now have a relationship with a company called S2N that can look at quick numbers and market research. We've also started to improve and increase our offering for physician-driven market research. When you have somebody who's not a physician who contacts, 100 doctors, it gets you certain information. But there's nothing like having people that are respected in there as a physician talking to those 10 key opinion leaders around the United States, not just with the first question, but with the follow-up question. And they can answer, get the true insider information. And that's where we're starting to really see a lot of growth, because that makes a big difference. Because then the company, whether it be a strategic, a VC or whatever, really gets good data to make decisions. And it's amazing how the first couple of times we did it, the companies go, man, this isn't like our market research at all. And so they almost didn't believe it until we did an in-person. They weren't participating. They were just in the room. We did an in-person mock-up, or not mock-up, but an in-person session at one of the big major medical meetings. And when they came out, they go, oh my gosh, there's a role for both, but this one is the one that gets us the answers we really want to know. So that's where we'll grow it as well.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Okay, a few minutes left here. I want to do a quick rapid fire, right? So I'm going to ask a few questions, just whatever's on the top of your head.
Okay.
Sound good? Okay. Good. Most common misconception about MedTech go-to-market?
That they're only out for money. They really do have, a lot more in out for the patient than everybody thinks. And I'll never forget some of the employees that I met, and they left Apple or left big companies, and I go, "Why'd you do that?" They go, "Because I can help patients doing this." So MedTech isn't just about the money; it's about helping patients a lot of times.
Yeah, for sure. One step that every founder should take before building a pitch deck?
A true business plan. A real formal business plan. You have to take the time. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But the better you know your business, the better you're going to be able to pitch that.
Yeah. Favorite insight that you've learned from working across so many kind of specialties and disciplines?
They're different. Just like when we were in medical school, there were certain personalities that went into different specialties. That happens here too. I mean, we do not just cardiovascular disease. We've done ophthalmology, we've done heart failure, we've done some electronics. I mean, different things like that. But all those specialties oftentimes have different personalities, and they have different trip switches to be able to get, their insight, or to get their, to get their excitement. And so we try to learn that physician specialty if we're not part of that, so that we can make sure that we're hitting the keys that we need to.
Yeah, that's great. And finally, what is the best piece of advice that you've been given, professional or personal, just in general?
I think I learned this. We did a course at Harvard Business School where we were teaching community hospitals. And one of the big teaching things was celebrate your failures. People will hesitate for failures, but failures are, things that teach you more about your device or process than anything else. So celebrate your failures. Don't be afraid of failure, because then you learn more from that than you do the success.
Of course, wins and lessons, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
All right. This was really insightful conversation. Where can people reach you if they want to explore working together or just kind of get in touch?
Yeah, then go to our website, www.hcir.io.
Okay, great. Or you could also connect with Dr. Ansel on LinkedIn, of course. If this episode sparked something, pass it to a leader, investor in your network. Until next time, I'm Jaden. This is the Pipeline and People podcast.